Joan Quinn Profiles. As an editor for Andy Warhol's Interview, the Los Angeles Herald-Examiner, LA Style, and Detour magazines, Joan covered the social set, the Hollywood hotshots, the international art scene, the mysteries of food, the excitement of travel, and the fabulous world of fashion. Joan continues to find creative people on the cutting edge who make things happen. Here's Joan Agajanian Quinn.
Hi, I'm Joan Quinn, and welcome to the Joan Quinn Profiles. Waiting to be profiled are musician John Sutton. He owns a bachelor. He doesn't own it, but maybe
I did pay for it.
Did you pay for it? You own it too, a Bachelor of Arts in Sacred Music and Biblical Literature from Northwest University, and a master's, which I think you own too.
Yes.
From San Jose State. And you own a DMA from UCLA. I don't know what a DMA is, so maybe you'll tell me in a little bit. John's career spans 30 years of work in community, church, academic, and professional settings. He works with young as well as old, amateur as well as professionals. It seems you were always destined to be a choral music person from the very beginning. How did it happen?
Well, Joan, for me, it doesn't feel that way. I grew up in a small town, a small home, my mom and me, and listened to music on the radio, and it was the 60s and 70s, and hearing rock and roll and getting excited about that. And I had a good band program in school, but we actually had a terrible choral program in the junior high and high school.
Wow, that's funny, because all of your education has been geared toward this.
It has, and I didn't know it at the time, but that degree in sacred music was really an undergraduate choral conducting degree. And I had a good voice. I was in actually all state choirs and all Northwest choirs, and I didn't really think of myself as a singer. I was a trumpet player.
I was going to say, does a singer, when you're in choral, does that singer ever think of going on stage or being in the opera or doing anything other than choral work?
Well, I didn't.
Do they? You work with a lot of this.
Yeah,
people.
I think they do. I think they,
especially the young ones, because you work with young kids.
Yeah, they really want to have a career as a solo performer or as an opera singer or
something more than the chorus.
Definitely.
When you worked at UCLA and San Jose State, you worked with really professional, well-known people. Who were those people?
Oh, my real choral mentors, Charlene Archibek, Dr. Archibek.
Ah, yeah.
And I just spoke with her yesterday, actually. She's doing so well.
You keep in touch.
I do. I mean, these people become, I think graduate degrees especially, you really work with someone, and you go to study with a person because you admire them, and you you went to study with her? I did. I came across her. I was sort of foreign to the choral world. I really didn't know a lot, yet I was a choir director in a church and doing the best I could. But I don't know that there was any difference that I could say, but for me, she was an amazing mentor and leader, and I learned a lot from her, not only about the choral art and conducting, but just working with people and behind the scenes, and she has a very tender heart and a very strong spirit, and that was a great model for me.
And at UCLA?
UCLA and the DMA.
Yes, tell me about that.
The DAM degree.
Is it a DAM degree?
It sure is.
Never heard of it.
It is. It's the performing counterpart to a PhD. So where a PhD is a research degree, the DMA is the Doctor of Musical Arts.
I see.
And so you might get that in cello performance or in conducting or vocal performance or whatever.
Oh, so they give it in orchestra work and music and voice work.
Yes.
Oh, that's interesting. And you got it in?
Choral conducting.
In choral conducting.
And I studied with Don Newen, who's another one, amazing force of nature and a terrific mentor and friend.
Do you have to search out these people and then choose the school, and then how do you get into the school, into those programs?
Those are great questions. You know, you do. I think you come across people as in your undergrad degree and in your professional life, you come across people who inspire you, either their writings or you hear their choir perform or you go to a workshop and you want to go study with them. And I think the other aspect, now having my doctorate and students coming to me,
I see.
You have to have sort of a meeting of the minds. Do I want to study with you? And on their part, do I want to work with you?
Do you want to take them on?
Exactly.
So is that when do you audition them, or what do you do?
You sure do. You get auditioned, and so you go through the normal university requirements for the audition process and letters and all of that. But then it's those on-site auditions and personal meetings, sort of measuring each other up, because a mentor and a mentee relationship is extremely close.
And how many do the professors have, students at one time?
Yeah, Charlene, she had about maybe 5 to 7.
Oh, so manageable. She knows each person individually.
Oh, definitely.
And in the doctorate program?
I think Don had about 3.
Really?
Yeah.
And is it because he was so selective, or because...
I would like to think so.
He was so selective?
Yes, it was a combination of things. One is I think he did want to keep it small so it could be manageable for him, and so that he could really invest in us, which he does and did. And also, UCLA is a research university, and so I'll just say this, I might get in trouble, but the performing side of it, we don't get funded as much, and we don't get so he didn't have the same financial resources, and not just the choral area, but all of the music area doesn't have the same resources as maybe other parts of the university.
As parts of the other university, I see. But you did take workshops, you did study, you did perform with the greats like Robert Shaw and Paul
Solomonovich,
and who else? Helmut Rilling.
And Anton Armstrong, and all of those great people.
Did you sing with them?
I did.
Oh, you did. So you saw them in a conducting situation.
Yeah, I performed with Robert Shaw with 2 weeks in a workshop, but each of those weeks resulted in performances, public performances, the Mostly Mozart Festival at the Lincoln Center, New York.
I was just going to say, tell us some of the halls you were in, because those were great.
Sure, Kennedy Center, the Lincoln Center, the Performing Chapel at Princeton University. The Schauspiel Hall in Berlin.
And did the conductors go with you, or did you go and the conductor was there when you were singing in those places?
Well, the conductors were there.
Were at those specific places, and you were the chorus.
And then we went and sang with them. It was tremendous times.
You talk about being from a small town.
Yeah.
What small town, and what brought you to California?
St. Helens, Oregon is the small town just out of Portland.
So you didn't get in the volcanic ash.
You're great. This is fun with you. The city is named after the mountain, and we could see it and hear it and just feel it in the ground as it rumbled.
But nothing came.
We got a lot of ash.
Oh, you did?
We did get a lot of ash.
Were you still there at the time?
I was up in Seattle finishing my undergraduate degree.
Oh, you were?
Yeah, at Northwestern University, right.
Oh, that's where it is. And why did you come here?
Well, a job, is.
Was it in films?
It wasn't. It was to teach at Azusa Pacific University.
Oh, it was?
Yes.
But then you got into film work.
Yeah.
Oh, did you get into it from Azusa?
I got into it more through the Angelus Chorale.
Well, let's talk about it. Okay. You're the artistic director there, yes. And that got you into film work.
It did. With the, I think through some of our contacts, we had, before I was even around, the Angelus Chorale had performed with the LA Phil, and in fact, I think they performed the first Beethoven's Ninth Symphony under Zubin Mehta in the new Walt Disney Concert Hall with a couple of other courses combined. And so the Angelus Chorale's been around. This is the 37th season. And so they would sometimes be selected to work with artists at the Hollywood Bowl. We did some things with Barry Manilow.
So how do they know how to select you? Because there's quite a few choral groups.
Being around for 37 years, you like that, did you? I think being around for 37 years, you know, you have staying power, and people have seen the chorale over numerous conductors and over a long history, and that history of not only being around but of excellence.
Well, how do you make it so excellent? Do you audition your singers?
We do. We audition the singers.
Who's we?
Well, that would be the royal we, which means me.
With other people too, or do you do it
no,
alone?
I do it alone.
Oh, you do?
Yeah.
And how many people in the chorale?
There's about 100.
Wow.
Yeah, and so,
then do you keep them for a long period of time?
You know, you're awesome at this. We have. There are those that have just moved into town. We have we audition every summer for new chorus members, and then we re-audition current members every year as well.
Oh, you do? Even when they're with you?
Yeah.
Wow.
Yeah. Every year, half the chorale is re-auditioned.
Wow.
This year, it's the altos and basses. So,
is that right?
Yeah.
That's really
and
something.
that helps to keep the performance level high, and the reason I do it by myself is that in an audition situation, people come in typically fairly nervous, and if there's sort of a group, you know, and I.
Oh, you mean to audition?
To audition
if there's a group?
yeah, or just.
Do you play the piano? Do you play your trumpet?
I do have an accompanist who helps us in that,
but they're really not a part of it. They're
no.
just doing.
Yeah.
So tell me what a day is like when you go to rehearse.
Well, I start over to Azusa, and then I head over around 4:30 and beat traffic.
Where do you head to?
I head to UCLA. That's where we rehearse.
Is that right?
In the famous choral room.
And Azusa is so far from UCLA. Oh, do they have a great acoustical room?
They do, and it just has the ghost of Robert Shaw and Roger Wagner and Igor Stravinsky and Don Nguyen and all of these, and Paul Solomonovich. And so you walk in that room, and it's had such amazing history there.
Oh, what a great position for you.
It is.
And so you start at 4:30, or you start about 5?
Yeah, I get over there, and then I spend time just having dinner and looking over the score, getting ready for the rehearsal, and rehearsal starts at 7:30.
Oh, I see.
Yeah.
I see. And how long does that go?
Goes till 10.
And then where do you sing?
Well, we sing this past year. This will give you a good answer. We started the season with a 9/11 concert at Our Lady of the Angels Cathedral downtown.
Oh, beautiful.
And then.
And are you on the altar? You stand on the altar?
You know, we were up in their choir loft.
Oh, you were up in the choir.
Yeah,
I see.
Yeah, that's the best acoustic there, to be up there. Then we, our home at this point has been the First United Methodist Church in Pasadena in Old Town, just up has one of the best acoustics in the city. So
they say so many of these churches have great acoustics.
They do.
Because I know people in Pasadena at the First Presbyterian Church,
Yes.
Jacaranda,
Yes.
Jacaranda goes there. Oh, and so you sing, okay, we've got that church. Where else?
Yeah, and then in December we were up the Walt Disney Concert Hall with the holiday sing-along sponsored by the LA Phil.
They do a great whole December, don't they? With lots of choruses and choirs coming in.
Yeah, so it's fun to be there, and with our host, David Prather, and we do a wonderful family sing-along, and what a joy to see grandparents and children and parents with the whole family singing together the great holiday songs.
That must be a wonderful place.
It's a lot of fun, and I get to conduct there, so.
Do you conduct orchestra?
I do.
You do as well?
Yeah.
I wondered, is there a similarity?
The downbeat's in the same place, but other than that, you know, the two instruments are so different. The orchestra members versus chorale members it's a different psychology, so.
Do you do much of it?
I do.
Oh,
I just got back from a 2-week tour to the Northwest with a choir and an orchestra together.
Oh, that's fantastic.
Yeah.
Do you do them both?
I do.
Oh, that's great.
Yeah,
thank you for coming, John.
Oh, Joan, it's been great to be with you. Thanks for your time.
Thank you. And thanks for watching this part of the show. Don't go away, because we'll be right back with Jim Morphesis. He's a terrific artist as well as John. I'm here with artist Jim Morphesis, who was born and raised in Philadelphia, received his BFA from Tyler School of Art, at Temple University, and an MFA, his master's from California Institute of the Arts, CalArts. The prize-winning artist whose work is in the permanent collection of major museums. He's been exhibited internationally and nationally since the 70s. I've always loved his work, and I do think that he's a prize-winning artist, as do other people in the country, in the world. So thank you, Jim, for being with us today.
It's a pleasure. Thanks, Joan.
You, I think one of the reasons I feel so connected is this weighty, spiritual feel of these things, besides being weighty and heavy in a lot of your pieces.
Yes, some of them are physically heavy.
They really are. Were you painting in Philadelphia?
Yeah, I'm one of those artists who never remembers when they didn't, paint.
Is that right?
Yeah, so I always did it. So going to art school was a cinch because there really wasn't anything else I could do.
Were there painters in your family?
My father, among many things, was an illustrator.
Oh, he was.
So what I got from him was, even though he was being a very successful illustrator in Philadelphia.
In the newspapers or in magazines?
Elks, mainly magazines. Elks magazine was one of his big clients, so he was doing large illustrations.
Large?
But things changed before I even came along, because when the war came along, and that was the Second World War, for a lot of people don't know about, that there were several of them. He enlisted because he was going to get drafted.
Oh.
And while he was being a very successful illustrator, he loved being in the service and stayed in for 26 years.
You're kidding.
No.
Did he do drawings in the service?
Yes, as a matter of fact,
that would
he
be a
did
great
a lot.
place.
Yeah, he did a lot of that work. I guess they were all freebies for him.
Yeah.
But nevertheless, he did do that. Then
So he
tried,
continued working, just like you said you always worked.
yeah, intermittently. Then he tried to get back into it, and his work was a little bit dated, so it was difficult for him. But we're Greeks, so he eventually opened a restaurant, as is the tradition.
In Philadelphia?
Yes,
Really?
in Philadelphia.
He didn't go to New York and open a Greek diner like everyone else.
That was taken care of.
That was taken care of.
Yeah, no, there was nothing in the suburbs of Philadelphia, so
Nothing left.
he did that.
But so, with that as a background, he was probably encouraging to someone who would draw.
He was encouraging, even though personally he tried to be as discouraging as possible.
Oh, he did.
He thought it was being an artist was a bad thing to do.
Even though he had a career at that.
Yeah, well, times got rough for him. Maybe it was that. Of the best, he always used the best materials and learned
I was going to ask you about the materials. Let's talk about those materials. And let's talk about that discipline that he taught you, or that you learned.
Just being, what I learned is just watching him work. And again, it didn't happen that often, but he was a terrific draftsman. And the materials were wonderful, and when he wasn't there, I would sneak in and use them.
Oh, you would use his material.
I would use his, and then when he found this out, he put aside the oldest brushes and paints and put a piece of blue tape around them and said, okay, these are yours, you can use these. So I never got any direct instruction from him. But I got a lot of critiques, too.
You got a lot of critiques?
He tried to discourage me from going into art. So in my last couple years of high school, he wouldn't let me out on the weekends unless I showed him 5 pages of drawings that he would approve.
Is that right? So you were really producing.
Yeah, and his idea was to discourage me. He didn't think I would ever do it. But I noticed that the more I did, the better I got.
I was going to say, isn't that what an artist has to paint?
Yes, but as a young artist, you don't really realize that. Then I noticed that I got better, so it really helped me get into art school.
Oh, that's really great.
That's how I put my first portfolio together.
So you put your portfolio together and you went to Tyler School of Art.
Tyler School of Art was a great traditional art school at the time, but also was in the Philadelphia area. Philadelphia just happened to have a number of really terrific art schools. So yes, I went to Tyler in traditional school.
And then you had either, I see this as the old masters influencing you, as well as the Greek church.
I had that right up until my last couple of years of art school when I decided to reject all of that.
You got rid of it all. But it's
but then I found out you don't get rid of it all. The imagery changed, Joan. Because I was doing realistic works.
Oh, you were. We've never seen any of those.
No, not like
Very-
I was doing. And as
no.
a matter of fact, at one point, I just got tired of doing those realistic works, and I was influenced by Barnett Newman and minimal art. And I put down the brush, picked up a spray gun and rollers, and did huge minimal painting.
You're kidding, from the like Velázquez and Caravaggio influences?
They
you
all
went
got
to that?
painted over.
They did.
As a matter of fact, that's how I looked at those pieces, as if, you know, all of that was there, but I painted over. And they were like, for me, they were still, for me, very much like large icons with the centers punched out.
This reminds me so much
Well,
of
I went back to that because I think that to jump ahead after Cal Arts in the 80s, painting really, late 70s, painting started to come back. And I think a lot of artists, myself, certainly reconnected with their roots. And
So you knew you could do something like this, and it would be part of
yes.
your life.
As a matter of fact, when I started to
This-
do more representational work,
Yeah.
I would paint it back over. Wasn't ready to reveal it until late 70s, early 80s.
Because this reminds me of Old Masters, this piece.
It's a really traditional memento mori image.
It is, but it
And,
still gives you, and this piece.
well, that really relates to the other art that I grew up with, which was the icons in a Greek Orthodox church. So these double crucifix images, and that one is a really huge one.
How
So they
large
started
is it?
small, and but it's huge, also big in size. It's about 95 inches across, but there's a lot of material there, and those paintings weighed a few hundred pounds.
Well, why? Are they piled? Are things piled on top of this? Wood?
Lots of wood, but all the wood in that painting served another purpose. Well, I thought the painting was about time and about history, the history of Western art, my history. I like to use materials that had their own history to them. I saw them as big slabs of paint.
Oh, so
I
the
never thought
wood
of a
had
sculpt-
history to
Wood
it.
had to be something that got used, that I would pick up around town, and I had to find it myself. So it was also bringing another history to the work.
Oh, I see. And
So they're all
this
about
became
time.
a little bit more abstract.
They started to become more abstract. I was influenced by that last painting you showed. Those figures came from Velázquez. I don't even know if anyone can see when they look at that two images.
I see it right there, right?
Yeah, and that's another large painting, so very abstracted, but very
So was it
gestural figures.
Was this also painted over and over?
Over and over, and ripped apart and put back together.
And then how did you nail them together? What were you doing? How'd you get them all stuck
They
together?
look very haphazard. They're hammered, they're nailed, they're screwed, they're glued, and even though it looks like things are hanging, I was really careful to make sure that nothing would ever fall apart. So they looked tied together with rope. They're really
Are they
solid.
tied? They are tied,
Some of
and
them are
some of
tied
them, yes.
and then resined over.
And okay, let's talk about the materials that you used. You used rope and wood and nails and screws, but what kind of paint?
Well, that's another interesting story because, at that time I wanted to go back to oil paint, but I wanted them to be thick and I wanted to paint fast. And as you know, painting thick with oil paint is going to take a lot of time.
To dry, right?
I tried many ways to come up with a thick oil paint that would dry faster. I worked wax into it and did all kinds of things until...
So you used wax, you used paint.
I did,
you used...
and then I discovered a paint called Magna paint, which was used on the East Coast. A guy named Lenny Beaucourt used to design paints just for artists. And for Morris Lewis, he designed an oil-based paint that would dry fast. It was the first step to acrylic paint. So it was a petroleum-based acrylic, looked just like oil, but it dried so much faster. As a matter of fact, they used to have a skull and crossbones on the can because it was so toxic.
Is that right?
And I really liked that.
How did
so
you use
I never used any. I can't believe I'm still here. I never used any of that stuff.
Anything?
No.
Did you have good ventilation?
No.
No, because
occasionally, but not always.
You weren't thinking of those things, were you? When
Wasn't
you were
thinking of those
working?
things. The paintings you just saw, those were all done in a very tiny studio before I moved to a larger studio.
And in the
No, you
70s
didn't care
and-
about that. You just wanted to get you wanted to get the work done.
In the 70s and 80s, was it? These paintings that we just showed?
I started to use that material late 70s.
Late 70s, so you were
into the-
already starting to use it on these pieces that we see here.
Oh yeah,
Yeah.
absolutely.
But then the other thing, those are heavy and strong, but you use something very ephemeral, gold leaf,
Yeah.
right?
I couldn't help myself. The gold leaf.
Did it fly all over the place?
Oh, it did. Oh, absolutely. It was. I used to try to pick it up. And
I know,
use
you
it,
can't
but
do
you
that.
can. And I crushed it into the paintings. I kind
So
of.
you could use your brush on it, I guess, huh? Would your brush pick it up?
The brush would pick it up, but then I used brushes and rags just to smash it into the surface. And there was a lot of surface on those paintings, but I wanted to kind of bury it in the paintings the same way that
It is buried. So if you look at something and all of a sudden there's just like, even on this painting here, there's a little twig, there's a little this, and there's gold leaf on this painting.
So it looks time-worn. Actually, Joan, there's glitter in this painting.
Oh, there's glitter.
My new kind of gold leaf that replaced the gold leaf is glitter. And then these very, very rendered paintings using something kind of chintzy like glitter, I kind of like.
Oh, that's...
It lightens things up for me. And it also gives me a texture to work on top of. But the gold leaf obviously connects to gold leaf and icons,
That's
which
what
I
I
always
was.
liked.
That's what I was thinking too. And the Greek church is filled with gold, right? Lots of gold.
I grew up going to a Greek church in Philadelphia that was decorated in traditional Byzantine style. It was incredibly heavy, ornate,
Fantastic.
very sensual experience with incense and all of that, and no English was spoken at the time.
Fantastic. I love it. But that's how you feel. That's how I feel about these pieces. And then you started, like we're talking about the one piece that's on the set, and it's layers and layers, and it's a rose opening up.
It's another memento mori image. Like for me, it makes a connection to the skull. But in some ways, it's a little more accessible, I think. And it's but that memento mori image, you know, it's about time.
Did
it's
you
about
buy?
time and hope. And the rose, it's particularly a rose, is an image that's just loaded with meaning.
Did you buy the roses? Did you
Yeah.
paint from real roses?
Yeah, you know, people come up to me and say, "Do you have a garden?" No, I don't care about
You
the
bought
garden.
them,
I
right?
have no outside. I'm in a studio. I would buy them at the flower mart downtown, take them into the studio.
And paint them at
And
different
work from
times
them.
because that is not the same as this.
No, they're all
Opening,
different.
they're all-
Everyone is different. Sometimes I open them. I photograph them because some of these paintings take weeks and weeks,
Oh, you
so I
photographed
can't
the
work
rose
from a rose.
at the point where you were doing it.
I
And
light
this
them the
one
way
is
I want them
different?
lit. It's an overhead light. It's kind of a high noon light, so it gives a certain surreal look.
So this is tighter and
They're
more
right.
red.
Yeah, and so those tighter roses. Those
And there's
hot-
no gold leaf. There's only glitter,
There's
huh?
glitter in
Oh.
there, which most of it gets painted over, but what's hard to see is that there's a lot of texture to these.
But you
'cause
do keep painting over and over.
They're layered and layered.
And this
yeah.
one is so deep.
They're kind of traditional. I start with gouache paint. It's almost like oil over tempera, which is a technique that goes back probably more than 500 years.
And then, do you use a knife? You use a knife too.
I do use a knife. I use my fingers a lot. I start with these with a very small brush. These are really tedious and a pain in the neck to do.
But you said you scrape a lot.
I work on wood panel because I still just
Is
because
this
I
on
do
wood
scrape.
too?
They're all in wood
Oh, they're
panel.
all on
So
wood.
in a
Because you
way,
do
it's like an
scrape.
icon. Yeah, no, a rigid surface. I always like to. I started working on a rigid surface when I started to do those pieces where I nailed and glued wood. I needed something hard to work on. Then I kind of liked that.
Did you ever work on canvas?
I did. In the 70s, I worked on canvas.
Oh, that's when you were doing rolling and spraying and everything. Well, these were at Garbusian's gallery in Beverly Hills. How
Right.
many pieces were there in that show?
I think we had 13 works on wood panel, and there were studies for almost all of those works on paper.
Yeah, so it was beautiful. And people were looking at them going like, they all look alike. And then you look at each one and the colors and the...
I never did a show I never did a series like that where all the works on panel were the same size. 'Cause
Yeah,
I
exactly. It
determined
was
this is the size that I
beautiful.
wanted.
It was beautiful, beautiful, beautiful. And I
Joan,
thank you
thanks.
so much for coming in and talking to
Oh,
us.
my pleasure, Joan. Thanks very much.
And maybe there'll be lilies next time.
Well, could be.
Thanks, Jim.
Thanks, Joan.
Keep writing. 777 South Figueroa, 44th floor, Los Angeles 90017. And the email is jaquinn1 at AOL.com.